Perfect. All right. We are back and ready. Thank you guys for bearing with me as I had, of course, why wouldn't I, an unfortunate turn of events that involved my entire computer setup fundamentally dying on me, which made me just a couple minutes late to this pre-show. But Brad gave me just a couple more moments to sit here and stew on what a game we just watched. Because look, for better or for worse, Brad, I mean, you tell me, was this the game you expected to see today?
Not at all. I had even been talking during the week about how the wind could maybe keep it low scoring. You need to tackle, even if there's a lot of wind, you need to tackle to prevent teams from scoring all day long. So both teams struggled with that throughout the day. Obviously, also some great offense, not just bad defense. I think there was also some undeniably unstoppable plays. Many of them from Justin Fields. So like we talked about this a lot, probably you and I. Outside of any podcast or anything, if you're going to lose a game, which you never want to, at least it was fun. I had a whole lot of fun for the first 57 minutes of this game. So
Oh, I mean, for crying out loud, Brad, like we'll talk about it just in a little bit here, but like I have had you on for so many podcasts where we basically say, well, the Bears won, but this feels like a rough look for the future. This is the inverse. I mean, for crying out loud, the first four you know what? You want to just start the podcast because everything we're going to say is something we should be recording anyways. You ready to roll?
yeah.
What's going on, everybody? And welcome back to Bear With Me, a Chicago Bears podcast hosted by yours truly, Robert Schmitz, right here on the Windy Secret Around podcasting channel. And Brad, I am all out of sorts here with Brad Spielberger from Pro Football Focus as we are breaking down a 35-32 home loss that Brad couldn't feel like more of a win. Fields combines for 4 touchdowns, over 300 yards, a new record for single game rushing yards, and the Bears come a ESB or an Equinemius St. Brown hands catch or just a decent DPI call away from potentially taking a win off of an extremely dangerous Miami Dolphins team. I mean, what are your initial thoughts as we start digesting this postgame?
It was frustrating to not get a true Justin Fields legacy drive potentially there. I never ever blame refs. That was one of the worst no calls I think I've ever seen in my entire life. Would they go down and score that touchdown or tie the game up with a field goal? There's no guarantee, but I think it's also cool to see. I mean, that's why just Chase Claypool was traded for that exact play. Him boxing out a smaller defender and Keon Crossan, and either you pass interfere the guy or he's going to catch the ball. They did the first one. The flag just didn't come out for whatever reason. When you see Miami Twitter accounts joking and laughing at how bad it was of a non-call it was, I think that tells you everything. But not to harp on that, not to focus on that. So many positives, so many good, highlight level plays from Luke Getsy and Justin Fields. Darnell Mooney's incredible touchdown catch. Just so much good to take away from this game.
Brad, I'm right there with you. I hate critiquing the refs because it always feels cheap, right? It's like, let's ignore what went wrong with our team or on this side of the ball and instead focus on 10 yards or a free first down that I think happened. But that call, rough, obviously. I'm willing to talk about the play immediately afterwards where Justin Fields didn't like what he saw, rolled out of the pocket, threw a ball that hit Equinemius St. Brown right in the hands to extend the drive and, fell incomplete. Which, you know what? I mean, the funny thing is, Brad, when we really walk away from this game, you could argue that both teams went into Soldier Field today and came out with what they wanted. Maybe not what the coaches per se would have wanted, but the Bears get that little bit closer to a truly elite top 10 player with a great performance from Justin Fields in mind. Not to mention, Brad, okay, I want to focus on this before we talk about Fields. Do you feel like there's any truth to the idea that you can almost feel an Eberflus effect in that a defense that could not buy a stop, could barely buy a third down, came up with not one, but 2 huge fourth down stops and a 3 and out when they desperately needed it? I mean, this was a Miami offense that had every edge you could ask for them. And suddenly, when they needed it most, they just couldn't find the points. I mean, that's exciting as a fan.
The 3 and out in particular, yeah. I mean, we probably talked about this as well, but on defense in particular, I think you're seeing it right now with the New York Jets. you can be a great coach. If you don't have talent, there's only so much you can do. And I've been incredibly impressed with Matt Eberflus and Alan Williams so far this year because I don't think it's a particularly talented defense. And some of the talent they do have is young and is going to make the rookie mistakes, in Kyler Gordon and Jaquan Brisker. So, it's tough. And the Jets now, you add a couple big name pieces and they just, beat the Buffalo Bills with that incredible, defensive performance. So, yes, I think there's still evidence of strong coaching. But you get rid of Roquan Smith and Robert Quinn in a week, you're not going to have a good showing, the following Sunday.
No, of course not. And yet it felt like the Bears got some, again, it's funny because I don't want to sit here and drum them up too much. They gave up a very convincing 28 offensive points plus a punt block. But now let's just segue straight into the story that matters, right? Fields looked in command. Chase Claypool looked like he contributed, right? Exactly like you're saying. 2 deep balls downfield and a couple of screens. You got a couple of those angry runs that he's now known for, which I didn't actually know they gave out an angry run scepter. That's on me. I should be keeping up with Good Morning Football better. But so I hear about the angry run scepter the same week that Chase Claypool comes in. But the DPI that should have been drawn by Equanimeous St. Brown last week gets drawn to start off the game. You obviously have the DPI later. Do you feel like Chase Claypool is part of the reason that the defense or the offense was able to gain such an edge? Or honestly, Brad, do you think that they were building up to this edge since the Dallas game and that Chase Claypool just gave them a little bit more?
I think it's a mix of both. He still obviously wasn't super involved, but he can command attention. I mean, the Darnell Mooney touchdown was against Xavier Howard, which I think makes it even more impressive. The throw was incredible, the catch was incredible, but you could also just see Mooney on some other plays. It was catching Cater Coho, their undrafted free agent who has been good, or just getting different matchups, being more open. Is it just him? Maybe like creating his own separation. I'm sure to a degree, but also when you only have to focus on one player in an offense, from a receiving standpoint, it's just so much easier to defend. So now Claypool, like you said, also he brings a jet sweep element. They probably ran it too much in Pittsburgh. Like you have to account for him all over the field in many different ways. I do. I think there's gravity he brings with him, and we saw that on display, across the field today.
And it's so funny that you talk about Claypool because you also mentioned somebody I think is well worth bringing up here, where I feel like Darnell Mooney, look, I don't know if this was statistically his best game. It's not like Fields threw for very many yards, but it felt like Mooney was a consistent tackle breaker when he got the ball in his hand. And that route he had against Xavier Howard was really nasty. I mean, 11 in particular seemed energized by the Claypool edition. I'm not about to say that Darnell's been underperforming up to this season. There's not a lot of passing yards to go around, and he's got the lion's share of them. But this looked like the Darnell Mooney that we expected to see this year, that maybe he's not a wide receiver one, as that term gets thrown around too often, but he can beat your best corner on a route in the end zone. And hey, if Fields can keep making throws like that, I mean, that was nasty.
He got hit to it. So it was a beautiful, perfect throw, away from the defender, and he took a decent shot on it. We also should shout out Cole Kmet, 2 touchdowns on the day, but had a couple angry runs of his own. That the first down rate, extended to get the extra yardage. But just looked good. I mean, reliable. We need to give a reliable hands catching inline tight end. I mean, again, we talked about him a lot. He's probably never going to be Travis Kelce. I mean, no one is really going to be Travis Kelce. But look, he's not going to separate very well against man coverage. But if you can get a guy that is not going to drop the ball, that is a legitimate red zone threat as he was today, can make some plays on fades in the corner and do different things, that's a massive asset going forward. So, yeah, I mean, all the pieces are starting to piece together, and it's exciting to see.
I mean, for crying out loud, Brad, it started to look like a video game where apparently if you assemble enough Notre Dame players on the same roster, they all get a stat bonus. And I'd have loved for Equanimeous St. Brown to catch the same bonus in his hands, obviously, at the end of the game. But this looked like a renewed Cole Kmet. I don't want to hear it from anybody that says this Cole Kmet's been on the roster all along. No, he hasn't. The runs that he was putting together, the snappy catches out in the flat, these were things, look, I don't want to say we've never seen them, Brad, but the whole team, offense and defense, but especially the offense, seemed to be playing like they had something to prove. I mean, Cole Kmet ran through not only that defensive back, which poor him, he got leveled by Kmet on that first down you were mentioning, but the touchdown earlier in the game, Kmet threw a couple of arm tackles to get into the end zone there and make things look awfully easy for his quarterback. This is an offense that seems like between trick plays, between every designer run that you could possibly ask for, like to almost out Shanahaning Shanahan, which I understand is the homerest thing to say possible. I know, I see your head nod. Nobody really really out Shanahan. But the designer runs that the Bears are starting to implement, I mean, anything that you've ever seen on Twitter, whether it's bash, GT counter, G lead, speed option, jet sweep, like any run you can think of, the Bears ran it, including but not limited to what looked like a wide receiver reverse with a throwback option to Justin Fields that Darnell had to pull down. I mean, the Bears are pulling out all the stops on offense, and who's to say it's going to work forever? Obviously, we'd be even more upbeat had either of their final two drives of the game cashed for any points, but 32 points, their third straight game with over 28 points. Awfully different feeling from what I think we expected, especially after the first 4 weeks.
Yeah, and I think it's huge also to be able to look. They said they had some tough conversations. They had to talk to leaders in the locker room about the moves they made. Yes, they did obviously add Chase Claypool, but get rid of two very important pieces on the defense and trying to say, hey, look, we're not like tanking or anything like that. We don't not believe. We actually do believe. We believe we need to see more out of this offense and see if we can fix that side of the ball. And that is going to be the focal point. And so for the first outing against a defense that frankly is not performing to the standard they should be, but nevertheless, to put up 30 plus points, to move the ball effectively through the air and on the ground in various different ways, like you said, to be creative, get a lot of different guys involved in many different capacities. It's got to be one where everyone's gonna, if they weren't bought in, they're bought in. They get the vision, they understand. Look, yeah, we're deficient at some spots, but we have a vision, we have an idea, we have a plan, and we're going to put you in positions to succeed. Just trust us. Get in line and realize that we're building something, and there's obvious, clear progression week to week. That goes a long way.
Absolutely, it does. Now, I want to put you on the spot a little bit because obviously, when you have a quarterback like Justin Fields, he throws for 150 yards or like less than 150 yards again, but has 178 rushing yards. So there are going to be plenty of people out there. They're going to point this out like it's some kind of red flag, 3 touchdowns or no. So, Brad, you tell me, sizzle or steak? Like, yes, we can see that Justin Fields is obviously a lot faster than Tua Tagovailoa, but do you think that Fields, even although most of his production today came on the ground, had a good day? Or do you think it's like a great day, but a mark of problems going forward?
I don't think it's a market problem. So yeah, I mean, obviously Tua Tagovailoa was incredible through the air. And so there's no excuse of hey, the wind I mentioned. Obviously it was you were able to throw. We did see the missed kick from Jason Sanders. So obviously it was swirling at certain times. I don't know if the wind is why Tua Tagovailoa had that last deep ball about 30 yards underthrown to Jalen Waddle, but nevertheless, no, I don't think it is because he also, I mean, look, that play to Kmet, it wasn't the same play as the Ryan Graham missed throw. But it was similar, right? With the delayed action, you wait for it to develop, you let him get out to the right side. That was on the money. Like I said, the Mooney throw is a legitimate big time throw. Yeah, no, I don't. And again, he's still at times, like you said. I mean, Equanimous St. Brown had. I don't know if you call that a drop. Maybe you could call that an outright drop. There were just. It wasn't like he was. Making a ton of terrible plays. The Xavier Howard interception wasn't a great ball, but obviously there were penalties there. Holding to begin with. But no, I wouldn't be concerned. Again, we want to see 200 plus passing yards, but when you set a record for the most rushing yards by a QB in a regular season game in NFL history, you can't also throw for 300 yards.
That's kind of how I'm feeling about it. Like, look, last thing I want to do is come onto this podcast, act like an analyst, and just talk like a homer, right? It is my ultimate goal to try to boil down to what really matters here. But I can't help but think, Brad, that putting this kind of rushing season on tape is what gives you cleaner pockets going forward. I mean, nobody can pin their ear back on Justin Fields right now, or he will fake out the QB spire and run around everybody and somehow put the ball into the end zone from 61 yards away himself. Like, the guy is a threat. And especially from what I'm seeing, Brad, what really sticks out to me is that on key third downs throughout the game, Justin Fields is manufacturing first downs. Raw rushing yard totals, frankly, it's neat that Fields set a record, but that doesn't do near as much for me as talking about the fact that Fields is stealing first downs, where a lot of other quarterbacks are, at the very least, throwing the ball away, checking it down for 6 yards on something like 3rd and 10. I mean, sure, we've got the sweet third and 8 throw to Darnell Mooney. Like you said, pressure in his face. That's through the air. We've got throws downfield that didn't get counted because you can't count defensive pass interference, whether you call the one at the end a bad call or not. Chase Claypool had an opportunity to create yards downfield twice throughout this game that came up for nothing on the stat sheet. right? But I feel like ultimately, am I being oversimplistic, Brad, to say that it's the quarterback's job to manage the game in front of him, create yardage, create opportunities, whatever way that comes? And if anything, Brad, because you're obviously coming from PFF, some of the most analytically minded people on the internet, as defenses start to shift towards too high, I mean, dare I say that a running quarterback may or may not be the path of the future for a lot of these offenses, as the more guys drop into coverage, the less guy or the more room there is for somebody to eat up ground underneath. I mean, right?
Oh, 100%. And we're also going to see now, too, is I mean, you almost need to have a linebacker spy or do something to account for his legs. Because, like you said, he wasn't just running on early downs, he was converting third downs with scrambles. And so when you do that, again, it's going to take away from your passing production because those are quote unquote passing downs. But also, yeah, I mean, let's say you do have a linebacker spy, then you're going to find someone over the middle, or you're going to, other things are going to open up, especially if you're playing too high. So it's already a lighter box count. And then you have a linebacker who's just focused on Justin Fields as a rusher. You're going to get someone open, whether that's a running back, whether it's Cole Kmet, whether it's, someone else over the middle. So, yes. And then what you do is like a Jalen Hurts this year, where you're then a more consistent passer week over week, and you can do both. Then it's nightmare city for every defense they play.
Absolutely. And I mean, of course, things are still heating up for Justin Fields. We're looking at a second-year quarterback, for crying out loud. And I don't like comparing quarterbacks because I wish we were all, mature enough in our football knowledge to not need to, right? But Justin Herbert right now is not having a phenomenal year. And it's not as if there's a bunch of mechanical issues, and I'm not about to take anything away from Herbert. There's a lot of people that want to take a lot away from a lot of young quarterbacks. Justin Fields is crazy young. I mean, this was he's not even got 20 starts under his belt, if memory serves at this point. And so there are pieces of this, Brad, that I can't help but think, yeah, it sounds corny, but he should be a lot better at some of the finer points of reading defenses, going through progressions, more familiar with the timing on his receivers, where people are going to be when they're going to be there in his third year. Like, let alone later this season. What's working now is great that it's working for now. I do think you can expand off of what's working for now. It's not working on accident. But I also do think that Justin Fields' tools that we are seeing, if there's anything I'm excited about, Brad, it's that earlier this year against, say, the Texans or the Commanders, you could say the weird sentence that was, Fields' tools are crazy and they didn't go anywhere. I just don't know if he'll ever put it together. We're starting to see what it looks like if he puts even pieces of it together. And because I feel like he's progressing in the right direction, it's hard for me to believe that he's not going to continue that progression, right? And that we get a little bit more out through the air as his legs start to become something defenses put. I mean, if you give him the Lamar treatment, they're going to take two guys out of coverage to stop his feet. And that opens up a lot of one-on-one matchups.
I think it's also fair to be optimistic because, I mean, look, this is not who he was in college. Like, we're not talking about a guy who played this way in college. He was an accurate downfield passer, but also was accurate at the intermediate level. I think he's always had some semblance of some occasional misses on short stuff and quick game stuff like that, which you can grow and improve on. But yeah, we're not saying a guy who was a 55% passer like a Josh Allen type in college.
Mhm.
That wasn't his problem. And so, yes, it's kind of been a problem now, but you have Ohio State level tape of him doing that at a very high level. Obviously, now you add the receiver. The protection will obviously get better this offseason. It has to. So, yes, I think you're not being, Bears goggles on if you say, like, we should expect it to happen because we've already seen it. It's not like they always talk about the hardest thing to teach is accurate passing, right? Like, you can't. It's the hardest thing to make an inaccurate passer into an accurate one. I mean, Josh Allen is a complete anomaly. Like, it's the craziest third-year breakout in probably the history of the NFL. So we've seen that. We know it's there. Can we untap it? I think mechanically, you mentioned, I think his quick release, it is better. It is different. Maybe
Mhm.
early in the season, though, that's why he was missing some of those throws. The Ryan Griffin touchdown pass, that was a really bad miss objectively. Like, if he combines hey, now I have a quicker release, I'm getting the ball out faster, and my accuracy comes back to where it was before, you got a scary, scary passer on top of the running, threat he is right now.
Absolutely. I mean, Brad, the most complicated part about what probably sounds to some people out there like a big old flip flop in the minds of both Bears local media and national media, where suddenly people go from I'm worried about Justin Fields, circa the Texans, the Commanders game, to okay, so Justin Fields is kind of that guy 3 weeks later. But everybody, fans, media members included, we were all calling for Justin Fields to stack games. And now New England is no accident because he followed it up with a great performance against a great Dallas defense. And like you're saying, Miami may be a defensive step down, but you still have to score on those guys. And he did. I mean, this was a game. This is what I said about the Dallas game, but it applies even more so today. Justin Fields is the only reason that people kept their TV on past halftime because what Tua did to this Bears defense was fairly unavoidable on a sunny day. But the Bears offense, which, shocking for this franchise, actually kept them in it. It's really exciting time to be a Bears fan. I'm excited to see where they obviously go from here. Sure, but the nice piece about this is that look, nobody out there is wanting to tank. It doesn't work like that. Players don't tank. You're not asking anybody to tank. But if you are a Bears fan, just take solace in knowing that gimmicky losses like this, whether it's Velus Jones dropping a punt and boom, they lose 2 games, or what feels like the referee stealing one from you. This is how you end up in the top 10 with the NFL draft with a team that still believes in themselves. Somehow the dice kind of feel like they're coming up Bears right now, Brad. And the funny part is, like somebody said in a chat that we're in on Twitter, it's hard to imagine that the Bears lose that many games. Not that they're going to go on some huge winning streak, but just that it's going to be tough to lose to the Lions with Justin Fields playing like he is. And that's not a bad place to be when you're trying to establish a culture in year one.
And that's like what we're talking about, where we used to come on and maybe, pour some cold water on a win. This is the opposite. And it's not us being biased and trying to see the positive. They did repeatable things that if they continue to do that, they're going to win football games and potentially a lot of them. I mean, yeah, the Detroit game might be like a 50-50 shootout. It might be the highest scoring game in NFL history.
Might be.
Although I guess the Lions defense can play against Aaron Rodgers. Nobody else. They had three picks on Aaron Rodgers today, but they can't stop anyone else. So anyway, you never know in this crazy league. It's insane week to week. But yes, it's a perfect way to put it. If they play like this, they're going to win those easy games on the second half of the schedule. And then you just ride that wave of momentum, get a full off season with Chase Claypool and Darnell Mooney and Justin Fields, and insert draft pick maybe or whatever the case may be. Maybe Velus Jones with a healthy offseason can kind of get back on track, because that is an underrated thing we've seen a lot, where you miss your first offseason, and then it really stunts your growth and your development. So again, all those things, yes, this is exactly what we want to see. Maybe still pick top 10, top 15, but score 30, like you said, what was it, 3 games in a row with 28 plus points? Like, keep that rolling, and I'll take a close loss. Again, though, yeah, the ref being the reason why potentially was annoying, but nevertheless.
It is annoying because honestly, Brad, I think everybody wants to see the officials kind of get out of the way, right? You just never want the officials to be a story one way or another. And I mean, look, I know this is a little ridiculous. I do think it ultimately helps the Bears long term. I mean, these losses are a lot easier to sell to the locker room than I think the losses that Dan Campbell has to keep his guys energized with after they put up, I mean, in some cases, as many 40 points and still lost football games. Another thing, if I can just say it, I mean, while we're talking positives about the offense, Brad, I think the main piece we haven't mentioned is that normally Justin Fields has been, over the last 2 games, obviously playing quite well, but he's been doing it in tandem with really nice play from his running backs, whether it's just Khalil Herbert going absolutely off or both of them. Today, next to nothing. I mean, if I'm reading the stat sheet correctly, Dave Montgomery, 14 carries for 36 yards, and then Khalil Herbert, not much better, 7 carries for 23 yards. The Bears still had their now 4th game in a row where they rushed for over 225 yards, and it's all Fields. I mean, when you talk about an offense beating you in different ways, Justin Fields combined for, if I'm doing some back of the napkin math correctly, at over 300 yards out of about 300-ish yards for the Bears offense. That's all you can ask for from a second-year quarterback, because I'm not expecting, I mean, Brad, I think something that fans just like you and me are always having to remind themselves is that we came into the league with guys like Tony Romo, guys like Tom Brady, guys like Aaron Rodgers, guys like Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, that literally they hit the league and they had unlimited practice reps from the quarterback position. They could practice literally as much as they wanted to. It's not that much of a surprise that, even though, I mean, for crying out loud, back in the day, Aaron Rodgers got to wait until his 3rd year to play, and even then he had his rookie lumps. We like to throw our quarterbacks into the field immediately and just start judging them. Right now, it feels like Fields is winning off of God-given talent, and that's okay. I'm excited to see where he goes because obviously we're seeing Patrick Mahomes show that even when you're already good, you can get even better from the mental perspective of playing quarterback. And I'm excited to see where Fields goes from here because he already looks dangerous. Thumbs up for that. But there's room to grow. We can all see it. And if he's able to get some of those finer things, some of those, I don't know, what would you call them? Fundamentals, I guess, of the NFL quarterbacking position down, then the 61-yard touchdown runs, if you keep those in there, you've got a dangerous player under center.
Yeah, and so it's a good point. You mentioned the lack of running game today. Super inefficient. Was at 3 yards a carry, or even less, based on the numbers
Yes,
you said. That's again where if you can steal some 3rd and 8 conversions with his legs, I mean, that's massive. Because if you're behind the sticks because of a lack of a running game, but you can both throw your way out of it or scramble your way out of it, it's huge. They're going to get Claypool more involved. It's going to open up the entire offense. It's going to make things even better. Like I said, he was involved today, but how much of the playbook can you really learn and be involved in that with that quick of a turnaround? So, yeah, I mean, there's a reason for a ton of optimism going forward, and I also think too, I think you do still see week to week him. Like we talked about this a lot with the former, top 10 pick quarterback. Like a lot of the same mistakes. I think Fields still makes mistakes,
of
but they're
course.
often new, unique mistakes. He hasn't seen something. A defensive coach throws something different at him, and that leads to maybe him not making the correct decision or whatnot. But you don't see the same mistakes over and over again. Eventually, there's going to be, he's going to get to a point where he feels more comfortable, where pre-snap he knows where he's going with the ball a lot of the time, all those things. Because, yeah, the one thing you're kind of not seeing still yet, I guess, is some quick game, which, again, could be the talent around him as much as himself. But if you get that going as well, and you get some first and 10 7-yard passes instead of 3-yard runs, like that's a massive difference in the overall, grand scheme of things.
Well, it's funny because so one of our commenters here, Brad, asked about any specific criticism of Fields' passing game, and with you mentioning the like the lack of quick game, I will point out if there's one flaw that I just don't know how the Bears really overcome, it's that there are a lot of quarterbacks that on quick game specifically they won't throw without the laces. I mean, it's a simple detail, right? But quarterbacks' hands are often 10 and a half, 11 inches. They don't need the laces. Like I know my tiny 8-inch hands need the laces when I'm trying to throw a football. Fields' hands are some of the smaller hands in the league. We haven't really talked about it because who cares? But it's not Kenny Pickett, but they're not big either. And it does seem as if when you watch Fields throw with the quick game, he's dramatically better. I mean, the ball explodes off his hand when he's got the laces, whereas his quick game throws can wobble a little bit, and you can tell that there's a difference in the way that that the ball comes out. I'm not necessarily saying that it's impossible to do a quick game with Justin Fields, just that there's going to need to be some practice there because it's not something he's comfortable with. The wet balls that he's played with over the earlier part of the season don't help him a lot. But even today on a drier day, Brad, it's something that I know I'm watching going forwards, wondering how are the Bears going to go about dealing with this. And I do think all the creative runs that they're doing is a basically replacement for more West Coast style quick game. I mean, if you can't play West Coast, then sure, run bash, see if you can get 5 yards on first down. But it's going to be interesting to watch that move forward.
I think again, for all we talked about with Claypool as a downfield threat, which we did see today, he also he helps with that too, where I think having the big bodied, big frame guy that you trust to win 50-50 balls, or that you trust to just get open on a quick slant, and just throw it to an area. It doesn't have to be perfectly accurate. Like you said, if he doesn't have the laces, that's the great detail only Robert Schmitz notices. And I'm gonna
Come
go
on.
back and see if I can pick up on that. But yeah, like that, I also think, look, again, Darnell Mooney's awesome, but quarterbacks are more comfortable throwing that type of pass to a 6'4", 240-pound guy than they are to a 5'11", 175-pound guy. They just are. And they probably, it makes sense to a degree. So, yeah, that's another thing that maybe you see with the addition, with more trust in Cole Kmet and him making some solid hands catches today away from his body, stuff like that. It's all going to come together. It's just there's so much of football and so much to learn and grow in and grasp, but I think he is, like you said, he's stacking weeks, which is all we can ask for.
All we can ask for. Perfect. Brad, we're going to step away for just a moment so the sponsors can get their word in. We'll touch on the defense a little bit before wrapping up with final thoughts and a couple surprises. We'll talk to you on the other side. And we are back with Bear With Me. I'm here with PFF's Brad Spielberger talking through what feels like a win, but is ultimately a 35-32 Bears defeat. And Brad, a big part of the reason for that is that the Miami Dolphins were able to get just about everything they could possibly ask for through the air today. And I got to ask you, you've been a big proponent of Alan Williams and the way that he and Matt Eberflus are coaching up this defense. Is this the kind of performance that worries you? Or is this the kind of performance that you would look at and say, look, anybody could have seen this coming. It's just going to take more horses to compete with a team like this.
It's actually funny. The reason why I think Mike McDaniel has been a revelation, and has been, I mean, remarkably successful, besides having a wide receiver on pace for 2,000 plus yards in the season in Tyreek Hill, but he can attack the middle of the field. He can win over the middle of the field, and he does that better than a lot of coaches right now. It's Tua Tagovailoa is the highest graded passer for us between the numbers, by like a decent amount. He did it again today. And yes, when you have two of the best early separators in the NFL in Hill and Waddle, that of course will help. But it's also what Mike McDaniel is doing schematically. And so when you're sitting in a lot of cover two, as the Bears of course are going to do, that's it's exploitable. It's what I think the future of if you're looking for an offensive coordinator and say, hey, what's kind of something you do differently or you excel in? Yeah, I don't just win outside the numbers. I'm not just Zach Taylor, and I run 9-8-9 all the time, and I run for 2 yards to carry with Joe Mixon, then I run 9-8-9 and hope Joe Burrow throws a bomb to Jamar Chase. Like, it's cool. I mean, they went crazy today against Carolina. Like, it can win you games sometimes, but especially with more and more too high safety looks, the ability to attack the middle of the field, which I don't think Fields is afraid to do at all, to attack Vailoa also is phenomenal at it, which is interesting because people, the height thing always comes into play, but I think he uses play action well. I think he navigates the pocket pretty well, and he's able to manipulate it so he gets a good throwing window. But yeah, so long answer short, not really, because when you can't generate a pass rush, that's Miami's weakness on offense, right? Their offensive line has gotten better this year.
Right.
Teron Armstead is, Teron Armstead at left tackle for them now, but when they've lost games this year, it's because teams have been able to get after them, generate consistent pressure, and then you can't let Tyreek and Jalen Waddle run wild. So no, it's not an overly concern. I mean, of course, it's concerning. You want to fix it, but it's not like this defense is broken or I'm worried about the coaching staff. It's like, look, you played an offense that's hung 35 and 40 points on a lot of teams this year, and you were undermanned, talent wise.
Have been undermanned, no less. I mean, look, Brad, this is a defense that it's not like it's schematically broken. The biggest criticism that you could give this Alan Williams defense is that schematically it's a little bit uninteresting sometimes. I mean, and that's fine. It's only uninteresting because we've seen it before. Right. And within that, they're going to rush for as often as they can. They want to get guys into coverage. We're very excited about that. More guys in coverage means better protection, usually. But when your front four is made up of Tashawn Gibson, love you, bud, Dominic Robinson, or Al-Qadim Muhammad, one of those two, and then maybe on your best down, you've got Angela Blackson and Justin Jones. Like, that is it kind to say that that's a bottom three defensive line in the NFL, or should we just go ahead and call it what it is and say it's probably the worst?
You had the wrong T Gibson there, which is very understandable. You shouted out our old buddy Deshaun, but
Every
no,
time.
I just had to just so we're
It's
talking
every time.
Travis. Obviously Robert knows that. Yeah, no, yes, it is. It is even with Robert Quinn, I thought it was a bottom five defensive line. And now they don't have Robert Quinn, so it is. Again, I'm not knocking the players. Justin Jones actually, I think, has gotten better and better. Has been really good the last month. I mean, not really good. He's been good. He's been an impact player on certain, and
Sure.
so, but yes, long answer short, yes.
Right. And so when you can't generate pressure against a guy who's, I mean, probably the most unguardable receiver in this league, and there are a lot of good receivers in this league, but Tyreek Hill, hey, can we just credit the guy? He left Kansas City. Everybody, myself included, said, oh, come on. You're really going to go to the Dolphins? Like, are you just trying to tank your career? And no, he looks like a superhero. Like, I mean, he looks incredible. And so kudos to him. I do think that this defense is going to continually run into the horse problem. I mean, Brad, at the heart of every good defense is a bunch of good players. Like, let's take Todd Bowles' Super Bowl defense from not too long ago. Those guys were all all stars. I mean, the sixth best player on that on that Tampa Bay defense was probably still an all pro. They were just all good. And so when you're dealing with two rookies in the secondary, like the commentators so courteously pointed out for us, that Jaquan Brisker played a little bit too much on his heels on that, or on one of the Dolphins' touchdown throws. They could have at least been broken up, but at best potentially been an interception. You're going to have growing pains. You're going to have games like this. I'm not worried either, if only because I think that the problem is very obvious and something that Ryan Poles is going to look to solve. If anything, Brad, I think that, believe it or not, the success of the offense makes me dramatically more optimistic about the defense, because traditionally, from what I have seen, you tell me what y'all's data is saying, it feels like offense, like you can't just inject a player and expect them to be the best version of themselves immediately on offense. Sometimes you get a Jalen Waddle, sure, but most of the time it takes like a heat up year, one way or another, a rookie year, normal rookie stuff. But you inject a superstar edge rusher, you inject a superstar defensive tackle into a defense, usually they hit the ground running, right?
For the most part, yeah. I mean, or it's either still a good player, right? Even if they're not great, like a Quinton Williams. Look, people were saying he wasn't living up to his potential. He was still a very good football player. He's now playing like a special top 5 talent, but he was. So there's still net positives pretty much earlier in their career. And yeah, even with Brisker and Kyler Gordon, they had their moments for sure. I think both of them are great tacklers. Brisker did miss a tackle or two today. And you don't draft a cornerback top 40 to tackle, but he's a great open field tackler. And so, like, I think you build it, back to front. You get those guys that are, playing forward and can make plays against the run and can cover. It's a good foundation to build off of. Like you said, you add maybe some free agent talent they have to spend. They can go there. If you do use that top 10 pick, I know we probably want on offense, but the Chase Claypool trade, maybe one of the main benefits of that is, hey, Jalen Carter is there for Chicago, or Brian Breesy's there for Chicago, and we cannot pass up the opportunity to take a potential game-wrecking 3-tech, or they fall in love with an edge rusher or whatever. It does make that much more palatable now that you do have two legitimate wide receivers on the team. Again, I think I wouldn't hate a tackle or something else, but if Fields is your guy, so you're not taking QB. And if you feel better about wide receiver, it makes it much more, realistic that they go that direction.
Well, and speaking of the spend, I mean, Brad, I've had you on. I've had you on so many podcasts where we talk about how the Bears' future. I mean, at the time, it was kind of doomed because the Bears were running out of money fast. They were paying all the wrong people, and it was more a matter of like, how are we going to not get under the cap? They weren't going full Mickey Loomis over at the Saints, but they were getting close with a massive Trevathan deal, a massive Jimmy Graham deal, despite multiple holes on the roster. We can see holes, we can see cap. If you are sitting in an office with Ryan Poles talking about what positions you want to target, who are some positions, like obviously we know some of the positions, but who do you have your eye on going into free agency that you think sets the Bears up to, like you're saying, ultimately take the best player that comes to them?
Yeah, I think a guy like Javon Hargrave in Philadelphia, if he makes it to free agency, I know everyone loves the name Deron Payne in Washington. He has played some really, really good football this year. I do think interior defensive line is a thing, something they will address. Because I think they do also want to more have the ability to rotate guys a little bit as well, right? They're not, full on like Dan Quinn in Dallas, or some of these teams like Philadelphia. I mean, the Eagles as well, where Robert Quinn played 7 snaps against Houston. Like, they're not, full on. They just want to shuffle guys for every single scenario. But you do when like you said, when you're often rushing 4, and you can have guys that are more situation dependent, can keep their legs fresh, and get better there. So those guys on the interior. The edge rush group is not great in terms of free agents, and you're also it's prone to overspending for sure. But yeah, as we probably talk about all these shows, adding mid-tier talent, the guys that can set an edge and can be decent, and then you maybe take an early round pick on one of those guys that can become Khalil Mack or whatever the case may be. That's, I think, how you attack it. And just see, again, with the New York Jets, like, it's not just about adding Sauce Gardner this offseason. It's adding, DJ Reed is playing very, very good football opposite Sauce Gardner for $11 million a year. It's a clear number 2 cornerback salary. And then Carl Lawson, $15 million a year, for a free agent edge defender. That's not, 20 plus million. It's a good deal. It's not a phenomenal. And now healthy, he's playing really good football. Matthew Judon, the Patriots signed for about $13.5 million per year. He's been phenomenal this season. So, I think it's you don't have to shoot the moon and go for the big sexy name every single time. But yeah, so those two guys on the interior, I think, intrigue me quite a bit.
Well, you've always talked about this, haven't you, Brad? That free agency, the real winners of the free agency are people that understand that you're trying to bring the bottom of your team up instead of trying to push the top of your team further up. It's harder to buy top end talent because if they were really top end talent, I mean, this is the simplest way to put it, right? They wouldn't have gotten to free agency.
Yep.
So it's better to recognize, okay, we need a second cornerback. Let's go buy one. Okay, we need a inside nose tackle that can hold his gap or maybe even a gap and a half in the run game, specifically offering me nothing in the passing game. You can probably find something like that. I mean, when you can understand why the player got to free agency, it makes it even more understandable what you're trying to spend the money to get them for, especially because if I'm understanding things correctly, you want most of your top end money to be tied more to extensions, right? The goal is to give your players extensions. And I mean, look, Fields won't be cheap forever. He's certainly cheap for now. But in the if Poles is thinking long term, he does have to address a world where Claypool probably gets an extension. Darnell Mooney probably gets an extension. And of course, Justin Fields gets an extension, right?
Absolutely. And this offseason, I mean, the receivers both, I think, will probably sign extensions, barring, something happening the rest of the way. I think Jalen Johnson is probably in the conversation. Maybe even honestly Cole Kmet. I know we've come, probably 180 on him. Again, I think he's a good player. But with tight end at the market where it is, you could probably get a pretty good deal there. Get some decent value. He's not going to top the market or anything like that. Maybe 10, $11 million per year. And he's a solid foundational, piece for you in terms of just like you just mentioned right there. Sometimes too, address one specific problem. Like you said, I need an early down 1.5 gap nose tackle. Let's just fix that with one. Again, that's kind of makes it sound simplified, but
Sure.
it's not always. Hey, let's add a Khalil. You can't always do that. It's not how this league works. So yeah, and they have, yes, for all the people want. I mean, they might have the most cap space any team has ever had this offseason. So they can do whatever the heck they want, and they have to spend, and they're going to.
Which we got to love. All right. So when it comes to your final thoughts about this game, what are you thinking?
I mean, I couldn't be more encouraged, frankly. Again, there's, maybe we could see more passing, but I think you also, for me, it's Luke Getsy as well. You mentioned running GT counter, running pin and pull, doing all these various different things, being so creative. QB draw. I think Herbert had a draw play of his, like just everything is on the table. There's just like it's so. I think it was kind of milquetoast and pretty lackluster the first month of the year. There were some elements that I think you could see and that you liked. But yeah, long answer short, I'm as excited as I am about the players, about Justin Fields and Darnell Mooney now with another cohort in Chase Claypool. I am a believer in this entire organization, the coaching staff, the front office. I think they get it. I think they know what matters in today's NFL, and they're going to set a path to address those things, and hopefully it continues to build.
Players like Mahomes, players like Josh Allen are special, don't get me wrong. But like you're saying, Brad, I am a believer that coaches win Super Bowls. I mean, I think coaches are the heartbeat of most organizations, and that when you have a good one like Bill Belichick, somehow you're the one who finds the Bailey Zappies. And I'm not about to pretend that Zappy's like a superhero. It's more to say, Brad, that first there's this perception across the NFL that the rich are constantly getting richer at quarterback or whatever position it is. But maybe it is as simple as good coaches develop players better than coaches that don't. And the Cole Kmet that we're seeing right now looks like a very different Cole Kmet than we saw in the Nagy era. You could even make the argument, just based on the way that Nagy was using some of his players, that he had the right idea and the wrong implementation, but it doesn't matter. What we're seeing right now is, so to tell the story of this game as clearly as possible, because I know there are some folks that would love more insight into what happened with the running game. The Dolphins played the entire game fearlessly with 8 guys in the box, 9 guys in the box, next to no real safety coverage for the majority of the game, right, Brad? Like they were daring the Bears to do anything other than run the ball with their running backs. And whenever the Bears did try to sneak in a run with their running backs, didn't really go anywhere. Bears lost a lot of downs to just running into a meat grinder of a defense that it's not that the Dolphins are incredible defense, but they were just waiting for those plays. And yet Fields put up 32 points on him, almost entirely on his own effort. Maybe this is because I'm a Bears fan, Brad, but I could care less whether it's through the air or on the the ground when the ground piece looks as dynamic as it does. I'm a huge believer in that NFL defenses are somewhat reactive week to week. And the more Justin Fields keeps pounding defenses on the ground, the more space is going to go, or open up for him through the air. And he's showing us enough through the air that we can believably understand that he will ultimately have his day. 3 passing touchdowns, though. I mean, the rushing yardage may have gotten him down the field. Throwing the ball is what put the ball in the end zone. And that's just as exciting as anything else. I mean, you got the 61-yard superstar touchdown run. You had a couple of outright Houdini first downs on the ground. You had some gorgeous throws, gorgeous touchdown throws. You had all kinds of stuff that point you in the right direction. But moreover, I mean, this was just a cherry on top of a great 3 weeks. And Brad, the Bears fans needed it. I needed it. I mean, if the Bears do have a quarterback, I think that there's a lot about their future that changes. But I'll tell you what, I didn't expect to sit here and like a milquetoast sounding defensive head coach in his 50s and what he brought to the team. And here I am completely buying into the Eberflus philosophy, because even simple things, Brad, I mean, it was very much like the Nagy era to get the big picture right with like a certain play call. And then 2 people would just like turn the wrong way because they didn't even hear that they checked to a different play and goof it up. On these runs, I mean, Justin Fields isn't even taking hits, Brad. Like,
I was about to say it. Yeah.
It's ridiculous. Like, they even understand that part of a quarterback run game needs to involve keeping your quarterback safe. An announcer today made a lazy Cam Newton comparison. Cam was lowering his shoulder and blowing guys up his entire career. Justin Fields maybe took 1 controlled hit on today's 178 yards. It was wild. I mean, it's cool watching this team, and I don't know where they're going to go. I mean, obviously, I actually think, Brad, that the hardest games for them from an expectation perspective are going to be when they play teams like the Lions, because they seem to have similar offensive outputs regardless of opponent. And so when they play a worse defense, people are going to expect 40 points. They may get the same output or even a potential flag game. Like, a second-year quarterback isn't here to be consistent yet, but just the fact that this 3-game stretch alone is encouraging enough. Maybe not like he's done, extend him, like put his bust in Canton, but at the very least, Brad, we are on track. And I think if that's the case, then I can't really clap hard enough for Ryan Poles, because if he was able to show you that Justin Fields was the dude going forward while still stripping the roster down, he pretty much nailed everything that he could have asked for. I mean, okay, I can't let you off before you respond to that, because there is a ton of heat towards Ryan Poles. So you tell me, like, what do you think of the GM so far?
No, and that's exactly what you're trying to. It's a tight line to walk, right? To where you're trying to think about the future long-term outlook of the team, and that requires some tough decisions and maybe makes the environment more challenging for the young players you are trying to develop. But you hire a coach that is a fundamentals and details guy, where I think we talked about this. He could be a guy that maybe builds up all the young players, develops them the right way. They don't make mistakes. They don't shoot themselves in the foot. You know what? Maybe a quote-unquote Nagy-esque type coach is the John Gruden version of Tony Dungy in Tampa Bay, right? Where like Dungy built those players up, made them good football players. Then someone else had to come in and maybe bring an X's and O's element that pushed them over the top. But when you're young and trying to build young talent, and you there's so much going on, there's always trickeration and window dressing. It's just too hard to even play solid fundamental football. So yeah, I'm not even really answering the question, but with Poles, and the biggest thing, and the deadline is the one indicator though, is he does get where the allocation of resources makes the most sense, and that is around the quarterback. And yes, Velus Jones not looking like a very good pick.
No.
Byron Pringle, unfortunately, injuries, kind of hasn't done much. And Keel Harry, now that he's healthy, at least he's a guy. He's blocking out there for you. He's getting you 2 or 3 catches. Again, like I'm not like he didn't do enough, or maybe you could argue he didn't do enough. I get that. But now what you're seeing is Fields can still rise above that and be productive and make plays and learn and get better on a week-to-week basis. And then because you didn't take the short-term miniature fixes, you can actually give him a ton. Whereas next year, the third year is always the big leap. Every team spends a ton if they believe in their rookie contract quarterback going into the third year. That's been the trend forever. And they are going to do that. They have the resources, also the now that if you do see this Justin Fields for the rest of the season, they're gonna, I'm not saying like make a Super Bowl put, like they're gonna be the Chargers this offseason where you sign receivers, you trade for Khalil Mack, like they're gonna go again, not all in, but like they're going to make a big push before, like you said, Fields maybe does get expensive in the near future. Hopefully, I would love him to sign a massive deal, and us have the conversation of how do we build around the big quarterback contract. That'd be my favorite conversation ever, but we'll save that one for another day. I think Poles knows what he's doing, and people need to have faith in the long-term vision here.
I think so too. I mean, look, I have seen way too many GMs come and do exactly what his name's Balky. Is that how I pronounce it?
Jeff
In
Balky,
Jacksonville?
yeah.
And do exactly that, where they just throw as much cap as they possibly can at every free agent that's out there because, like, the prevailing attitude almost seems to be, Brad, well, they can't be worse than what we're working with here. So if I spend money, our team must get better. And the Jags don't really have a path to getting a lot better than they are from a roster perspective. Did they end up winning today? Because I didn't
They
check
did
the final
win
score.
finally, and they have
beat
6 one-score losses. So, like you said, we know who they are more on a roster standpoint. They just need to play better and finish games.
Absolutely.
Whereas the Bears can get better as well.
But we could say the same about Chicago, and they should have a really healthy influx of talent this week. I mean, that to me, at the very least, is the most exciting piece about this Bears organization going forward. Obviously, it looks like a strip down. Obviously, there are tons of people out there that would still look back and say you didn't do enough for Fields. But I mean, look at Fields. He seems like he's got enough at the very least. Like good coaching and solid scheme really can, I think, at the very least, Brad, because what we see, let me frame it this way. What we see is a couple of games, a player playing for 3 hours, like roughly 80 snaps every week, right? But that player plays a lot more football than just what goes on the on Sundays. They play in practice. They play all off season. And I think that matters a lot more. That's why we're so pro coach, right? Is because if Luke Getsy is the right kind of mind to help Justin Fields grow, then it doesn't really matter whether Dante Pettis and Equanimeous St. Brown are taking up significant snaps. Fields will understand the process of what he's trying to achieve. It sure looks like that's what he's doing. And I think that's exciting.
Abs could not agree more.
Perfect. Brad, what's coming up for you? I know you just got through the deadline. So, I mean, it's not like you're off, right?
I wish. No, certainly not. We got a big piece coming out this week. It's actually, we do like a preseason ranking of every roster. I'm now doing hey, we're halfway through the year based on what we've seen and some growth from players and how things are gelling, kind of a mid-season ranking. The Bears, I didn't write the first one. The Bears were 32nd in the NFL. So I'll tell you this, they're no longer 32nd. So they're moving up.
I love it. Perfect. We'll make sure to check them out. Obviously, keep tight with the Windy City Gridiron like YouTube channel and podcast channel as we're coming at you with Bear and Balance tomorrow. Tuesday, we'll be going through the All 22. It's going to be a lot of fun going through this Bears offense as it has been for the last couple of weeks. So until then, Bears fans, bear down, and thanks so much for bearing with me. Perfect, Brad. Thanks so much for jumping on. Again, I know you're busy. Feel free to drop whenever you want to. Looks like we've got a couple of solid ones. Ooh, the Rams are beating the Buccaneers. That's always fun because that always sets a lot of people off. But like it's a good year. So, it turned from a really bad year into a really good year. The Washington game, low point.
Yeah,
but
that was rock bottom at that point, wasn't it?
I definitely didn't think that after the Washington game, we could even get to this point. I understand there's so many people out there that are like, I knew, and I'm glad you did. But picking it all apart, it did not feel like things could really switch. If anything, Brad, Fields is one of those players that, like, if he can make that jump, obviously we need to stay patient with plenty more people that do. But I do think that past a certain point, truly, us Bears fans just have fatigue watching young quarterbacks, and the leash gets shorter with every failed one because we just get a little bit less patient.
Dude, and the funny thing too is I had zero hope for the Patriots game too, because specifically Justin Fields, our lowest graded quarterback against man coverage. He was fine. He was still, kind of bad against both early on. Obviously, it's early and all that. And now look, Miami, New England, to know how to, hey, if I'm playing a team that plays a bunch of man, just take off. If they're gonna, their backs are to me, they're not looking at me. They're chasing receivers around with their backs turned to me. Yeah, there's just. It's as I would stay in chat for an hour. I do have to run, but
yep.
We'll obviously be chatting all week.
Absolutely. Talk to you soon.
See you later, man.
Cody, if you think I missed this, you're crazy. Seriously, Brad, feel free to drop whenever. You don't need to stick around for this.
Yeah.
Catch you soon. Cody, I did not miss this. It just didn't quite fit in. Don't worry about it. I'm here. But so you said this earlier as the trades, it's not simple to what you already have. The D wasn't good before the trades, still not good. Offense better via 1 second round pick. Everything has a weight to it. Right. So it's not as easy as one thing or another. But so let me talk about this for a little bit because I did see it the whole time. So the problem with a second round pick is, just to be clear on what you're paying, you're not only paying a single second rounder, you're paying the 4-year contract that comes with that second rounder. And when you pay it for Chase Claypool, you're getting 1.5 years of Claypool instead of 4 years of a second rounder. So you lose 2.5 years of cheap either way. That's, if anything, value guys like Brad would tell you that's the biggest thing you give up, is that even if so to use an example, let's say Kyler Gordon ends up just okay, right? He's just okay for a rookie contract, which it's not cheap, but it's not expensive either. So that's why people complain about it so much. I mean, first of all, you also have plenty of people out there, I think Brad included, that think you can, that they think anyways that you can get Chase Claypool for less. Had to put my thoughts together. Sorry about that. But I'm not so sure. I mean, truly, I'm not so sure. I there's just too many reports right now about plenty of other teams offering second round picks as well. It doesn't bother me that the Bears gave up what they did to get somebody that I do think is a good fit in their offense. Jordan, how you doing? I see you. But so I do think trading Roquan ultimately, okay, so I think it made their defense worse. I think that Roquan would have made a couple of plays that Sanborn, for instance, didn't, but that doesn't bother me. I mean, sure, it's not great for now, but I don't think for now is where the Bears need to be thinking. And not to mention, Cody, not only did we get a proven player, okay, so to use an example, if you could spend a second round pick and get a top 10 left tackle, nobody would debate, right? I think we all agree. Nobody would debate. If you could spend a second round pick, you could get a top 10 left tackle, nobody would debate it. Now, the reason I say that is because at wide receiver, I do think Chase Claypool is a top 40 receiver. That's being generous, right? 90 receivers start in the NFL. So we're not quite right at like top 10 left tackle, but let's use that metaphor just to make the point, because there's 32 left tackles in the NFL. And if you were able to get a top third left tackle for a second round pick, that's effectively what the Bears did at wide receiver. So within that, I do think the value is actually there. Like, I would, if I had Brad on, he would be nice to me because he is on my show and doesn't want to completely embarrass the host. That's like rule number one of podcasting, right? But he thinks that Chase Claypool was, in his own words, just to use him as an example, he thinks it was an overpay for the player, but it was clearly in like targeting the correct position at a correct need given value in the future. I ultimately think, Cody, if this is what you're going for, that the Chase Claypool trade was market price and a price that I would pay again, because I think that it would have been that much harder, right, to or to get the same thing you're getting from Claypool. Not literally now, but now that you have Claypool in your offense, I think it would have cost you more than a second round pick to get the same element going forward, despite what anybody would say. Because if you did get it out of literally the same second round pick, you'd be taking a risk. I think a greater risk than you get out of Claypool, because we do have the added premium of already knowing who Claypool is, which you mentioned that right at the bottom. The offense is so much better via 1 second round pick because of a proven player. But I do agree that if there was a position that, I know Jordan and I, we've talked about this offline, if there's a position that I could see, or that I wanted the Bears to take somebody proven at, or at least make sure they got something at, it needed to be that outside deep threat receiver for Fields. Because if you got somebody that just didn't work out there, then, which granted, I mean, there actually aren't that many early receivers that are drafted to play that role and also aren't working right now. It's, I don't know. It would have been awful to see the Bears spend a second round pick at that spot for the spot to not be fixed, because then you're stuck. right? If you spent the second round pick for a question mark, because all rookies are question marks, and things didn't get better, well, you can't replace him mid-season, and then it just gets bananas. Like, I think getting Claypool really helps. Uh, Jason says, "What does Claypool look like in a month under this offense?" I'm guessing pretty good. Jason, I don't really know. I mean, the Bears have actually run such an almost routine and a routine and boring passing game in many cases that I think that Claypool is going to really start opening the playbook up from the passing perspective. The Bears were trying to find anything that works and they found something on the ground. Now it's time to expand what they can do. Obviously, Claypool comes in and Fields throws 2 go balls, which is what now brings him up to 5 go balls on the year. It's not like the Bears are running many of these. And so I think that it's a very clear role for Chase. And so seeing him now get down the field twice against man coverage, seeing him draw what should have been 2 DPI calls, in my personal opinion. I mean, it's hard to watch that play and not see a second DPI call, right? Especially after the Eddie Jackson DPI, which I thought was Eddie playing the ball really, really well. Looking back for the ball, just like the NFL wants you to, bumping into the receiver is effectively on accident as he looks back for the ball. Like, I wouldn't have wanted that to get called, and I would have obviously wanted the Claypool one to get called. Call me Bears homer all you want, but I think that that's the way the rules are supposed to be applied. So we we spent a second round pick for Chase Claypool to come over and be that deep threat down the field. He is. So now that he is, defenses have to treat him like he is and immediately cut inside. Or, well, the defense have to treat him like he is, give him a little bit of cushion up top, which opens up curls. Yeah, Nagy curls. Opens up digs, opens up crossers, opens up a bunch of other routes that I think matter. Right. And so those will like help open things up in the offense, I'm assuming. And we'll have to see if the passing offense even gets room to breathe at this stage because the running offense is so healthy with Justin Fields toting the rock that they don't need to pass. And the Dolphins, like Brad was saying, play a ton of man coverage. I don't think the Bears man beaters are particularly developed, like the man beater routes. That is, they've done a ton against zone, but it's gonna be fun just to see him move forward. Let's see. Should have taken care of Fields. Pop fact. What kind of fact? I mean, I think the Bears have done fine. I mean, truly, I think they've done just fine as is. They gave up 1 sack today. Somebody was asking about that earlier. That says just about as good as you can ask for. And the protection is clearly benefiting from the fact that their quarterback is scaring the daylights out of a lot of defenders that are trying to play contain. Let's see. Case says, I don't love Claypool, but I like the second round pick for him. Case, I think that's exactly the way to say it. I mean, so Case, I talked about this with some people earlier in the draft cycle, right? Where they were talking about Christian Watson, to use an example. Okay. And so when they were talking about Christian Watson, they would say, I hate Christian Watson. I can't believe people are so high on Christian Watson. Unbelievable. People are so high on Christian Watson. He can't do this. He can't do that. He can't catch the ball. I don't know why you would take him with a first round pick. And then I remember cocking my head saying, wait a minute. Who said they're taking him with a first round pick? Do you hate him specifically? Like, or do you actually hate Christian Watson, or do you hate the way that he's valued? And if he's taken in the mid second where he ought to be, that's fine for you. Like you're saying, Case, as a wide receiver, one, I don't think Claypool's quite good enough for for the role that he needs to play as an outside threatening receiver, a kind of a faux extra. No, not a faux X receiver at all. An X receiver. That's what he is. And just a lot of people have conflated X receiver with Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson is a superstar X receiver. Claypool is a normal X receiver. And I think that's fine. I mean, Fields placed 2 very catchable deep balls down the field. Both of them likely should have drawn penalties. That's the role. And I mean, if you can pick up chunks like that, good. Let's see. Claypool showed part of it. Or did we throw a pass in between the numbers today? Yes, Jeremy. It was at the very start of the game. I believe a defensive lineman got his hand up, tipped it, and Pettis caught it anyways. So kudos to 18 for rolling over and getting that. Outside of that, there was just not a lot of stuff that the Bears could do between the numbers because Miami, as you'll see in the all 22, was just like, that's where they had the whole defense. I mean, okay, so I got to use my hands because we're not on the other streaming platform. We're on StreamYard. But so if this is the numbers and this is going out, right? they would have 1, 2, 3, 4 guys here, 1, 2, 3, 4 guys here, and then a safety a little above it. So there was 9 guys in the middle, and you should just attack the edges, which they did. It looks like Fields wasn't taking the middle of the defense, or like wasn't trying to take advantage of the middle of the defense, sure, but there's a reason the Bears were as effective as they were getting outside of the numbers, and it's because the entire defense was sitting in the middle. And so I don't mind it at all. From a schematic perspective, that's what I would have done. Like you're saying, theme torturous. It's smart to notice more clean pockets, because there was more clean pockets. The Bears, sure, they brought in different blocking sets. They're running more complex play actions again, which I do think can border on gimmicky at some points. But the blocking sets are creating clean pockets, and then on true dropbacks, I mean, especially as a man defense, there were a couple of moments where Fields saw man pre-snap, dropped back, counted a 1, and just ran it. I mean, I think he looked at his first read, decided he didn't like it, and ran, and he would get first downs consistently, because when you're in man coverage, you run and you can get a lot out of it. Let's see. Don't jump. Yeah, exactly. Don't jump into the teeth. Let's see. You missed the start. What did we think of Fields passing? Christian, I think that Fields passing was no gimmick. I mean, we came from a whole lot of stuff in the Nagy era where it felt like the Bears quarterbacks would score off of like gimmicky passing plays that were super duper easy. Obviously, the throw to Cole Kmet for the first touchdown, and frankly, the third touchdown, weren't particularly complicated, but that throw to Darnell Mooney on 3rd and 8 with a man in his face was awesome. The throw to Chase Claypool, both of them, frankly, catchable deep balls. That's all you can ask for. There are a lot of quarterbacks that can't push the ball down that far down the field. I thought that Fields did a good job getting the ball out on some of the screenplays. Some of them were finicky, but we didn't have any incompletions or any really sad ones, right? I do think that Fields is starting to do a really good job of, when he's got a man in his face and needs to get the ball out to the flat, he's able to do it. And that's a good thing. The Dolphins were bringing a lot of pressure today. It's not like there was tons of time to just sit back in a clean pocket and navigate the field. And I'm not going to be the kind of evaluator ever, whether we're talking about Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Kirk Cousins. I mean, pick somebody you don't like, somebody you do. Right. That's what I'm saying. I am not going to fault a player for going a different direction, like running the ball, and then being successful with it. Jordan, you ask about Kmet. Kmet looked like a new man today. Like, you can say, because I know you're going to, that this is like how they should have been using Kmet all along. I would tell you, I think they've been trying to use Kmet like this all along. He hasn't gotten these kinds of opportunities, but he looks energized. I mean, the Kmet that I've seen for a couple of weeks now, I mean, if not his whole career, doesn't truck defensive backs quite like that Cole Kmet did. And yes, he's taken a couple tight end screens, and it's not like he's been soft with them, but I do think that the Kmet we saw today, hands catches, quick with the ball, like effective as a runner, is the kind of tight end that you can work with going forward. We're still not getting any of the dynamism, right? That the Bear, or that I think that some people would want out of their tight end. I know I'm asking for too much. He looks like a solid Y tight end, unsexy, solid blocking, like get out, make some plays in the passing game, 2 touchdowns, 3 in 2 weeks, upward trajectory. That's for sure. And if anything, it makes me wonder whether an extension could be on the table to try to keep his cap number relatively medium. John, you mentioned the deep seam route. First of all, that was a good decision by Fields, because against the Tampa 2 defense, you've got to push the ball down, or like into the deep middle. That's exactly what the throw you want to see. I'm gonna need the all 22 before I tell you whether it was a missed target or not, because Kmet did need to jump for sure. I think the ball may have been just a smidgen over his head, but you got to remember, I mean, so most quarterbacks are going to put out, especially on deep passes, a completion percentage much closer to, I think that somebody did the data at some point, and it was like 40% is extremely good, 35% is okay, right? And so it's like 35% is basically the NFL average on throws beyond, I think it was 15, maybe 20%, or like 20 yards downfield. Fields throws the ball down, or 20 yards downfield, a lot. And so because he does that, his completion percentage falls, his yards per attempt go up. It's why you have such lopsided numbers as Fields has had over the last, I'd say, couple weeks, is because his completion percentage is naturally, I mean, what I think I'm trying to say is this. The interception that he threw to Xavier Howard that didn't count is a much more like, I don't know, worrying play than like a missed throw downfield, because if Fields hits all of his throws downfield, he's like the dude. Nobody really does that. I mean, people miss downfield all the time. It's not an excuse. It's a statement of fact. And so the fact that he's able to connect on other deep shots down the field are where you make up for the ones that you miss. You're trying to stay around 50%. New Poster says really need an honest to God receiving tight end. Honestly, New Poster, it's sometimes hard to tell. I think better receiver, or like better play from Claypool and Mooney will actually loosen up Kmet, because you just can't dedicate the bodies to cover everybody like you would be able to otherwise. And if those two, especially if Pringle can make some kind of a dent, is like, because in KC, he was one of their primary man beaters, believe it or not. So if he can play a little bit, you don't need Kmet to go win you man coverage routes, and he can go eat up against zones. That's the goal, right? But so I don't know. It's complicated because I do think that the gap between an okay tight end and extremely good tight end is wider than maybe any position in football, save quarterback. But that's how it goes. Let me see. Somebody mentioned earlier, you get happy when you're able to catch the show live. Well, thank you so much. I mean, Cody, that's really kind of you. I really appreciate the support. Whatever, like we want to be realistic, but we want to be positive within that, which we're all about. Like you're saying, John, today he was 1 for 3, I think. If that's what I'm catching you for. Pop, if Fields had been drafted by the 49ers, he would have been a Super Bowl quarterback right now, probably. But kudos to Chicago for being able to work with him, find this balance, and build up from there anyways, given that I think Pace really set Fields up to fail when he drafted him the way that he did, because he was on a roster where the arrow was pointing down, and then it just kept going down. It was really nasty. And New Poster, I hear you saying sure, but anyone can do that. You wouldn't pay much. I'll tell you what, it's going to sound corny. Cole Kmet is faster than Ryan Griffin. Even if only a little bit, or even if slightly so, he is faster than Ryan Griffin. So as much as may look like an every tight end, I do think that that somebody like Cole Kmet is the kind of player that, look, it's not that you have to build around him. And I'm not trying to be overly reactionary. It's more like if he's going to command a Kyle Rudolph cap, you make the same decision that the Vikings did. You let him go get that bag. But if you're going to be able to get away with paying him $6 to $7 million for the next 3 years, that's pretty cheap. And so you might consider doing that just to keep cap spending low in general. One of the best plays, Case said, of the game was just watching Claypool make the first man miss running through him. I agree with you, Case. I also think that that it seemed to catch on as suddenly Darnell Mooney was able to make that that first guy miss as well. Suddenly the Bears' top 2 receivers looked like top 2 receivers. Cody asked, where did I get this hat? I cannot remember. I've had it for years. I believe that I don't know. I think I found it in a store once. I would love to tell you more than that. It might have been from a trip I took to Chicago years ago. Let me see. It's a Reebok hat, if that helps. But I don't actually know. Perfect. I can take like one more question, then I got to go. I get to hear Mike Singletary speak tonight at a gala event in Dallas, which I'm very excited about. I think it's more like Baylor related, but still always fun hearing a legendary Chicago Bear talk. You're right. You're right. It's on the top. 100% is. But so it's right here. So you can see that. But so let's see. Claypool would also get off the line clean in ways that Mooney and everyone else can't. 100% or like totally agree. I think overall fun game. But so I will take the next question that I see, and then we got to go. Let's see. Look forward to watching Brad's part. Thanks for this. Yes. Wait a minute. I just realized that I need to actually edit the podcast. So I'm going to close things up. You guys are great. I'll see you on Tuesday. Hope to have more out. Go Bears. Catch you soon. Bear down. And thanks so much for bearing with me.